Will Levis was throwing to his receivers today, which let's show some of their videos. And I don't even know what order I add these in, but let's just play the first one here, JT. Some looks at the receiving, the top receiving options, the top four. Five receiving options, because I included some footage of Jaquan Jackson, the Titans rookie round, sixth round pick, right? Sixth round pick. This first one here is Tyler Boyd, the newest addition to the Titans wide receiver room. Here he is running some routes, and I'll just give you my general. And again, it's day one. It's May. We're not gonna no sweeping, no bold predictions. We'll do sweeping predictions. How about that? And the sweeping generalization on Tyler Boyd is he looks the part. He looks like a savvy vet. Looks like the kind of guy that is going to create separation in the short area and be the slot receiver you want him to be. He's actually a little bit bigger and I know what he is on paper, but he looks and plays a little bit bigger out there than I was anticipating. Probably not for you because you're used to watching him play a lot of ball. And earlier in his Cincinnati days, he was playing outside more than he has been in recent years. But he looked the part. Not really a whole lot to say on him. Let's go to the next receiver here. Let's see who this next guy is. This is that's a little Jaquan Jackson. So this is the Titans' 6th round rookie out of Tulane. The number one thing that stood out about him, and I posted this video compilation that I made here on Twitter, and people were moving mad in the comments. There were some strong takes being thrown around. Jaquan Jackson better than Treylon Brooks. Jaquan Jackson. I saw somebody say we found our new Khalif Raymond. We've got our guy. Maybe let's pump the brakes a little bit on Jaquan Jackson. But generally speaking, the takeaway from the first day really watching him out there is this guy's got the giddy up that you're looking for. He can turn it on and get as quickly upfield as he needs to be. He's going to be able to run under that ball if you put it anywhere even remotely near him. And in that first clip right there, JT, if we can play that again, that was a good example of kind of what we saw from him a lot of the day. It's right here where it's turns it on and can cover 10 yards in the blink of an eye. And that's what his role is going to have to be, right? Because he's not got the size to compete on the outside with anything beyond just kind of a burner role. He's not got the polish to be an underneath guy all that often. I don't think he's going to need to be that Khalif Raymond role. And whether he is that guy or not, we'll see. Let's make the roster first, maybe. Exactly. I'm not saying I am down on him necessarily. I just, he's a 6th round rookie receiver who we weren't super high on in the pre-draft process. So I need more than a couple of reps today to change my mind on him. But generally speaking, I was pleased with what I saw. JT, any thoughts, or should we go to the next guy?
Yeah, I was going to say, it would be really weird, I think, to see him not make the roster or not have a really, really good shot, as we saw last year with Colton Dowell. If Colton Dowell's making the roster, really feels like a 6th round pick in Jaquan Jackson probably has a decent chance to make the roster. Specifically, like what Tyke Tolbert said earlier at rookie minicamp with the, his ability to be a factor in the new kickoff rule and in the punt return game and kick return game. Like, those are big things that I think they brought him in for. A lot of this, what you're watching right here, is a lot of the same drills that, and I believe most of the wide receivers ran the same drills, but very much in the same category of, the movements that you would want from a guy in the slot. And that's exactly what he's going to play at the next level, given that size and that speed. And you see some of the short bursts and quick movement, not exactly the most, technically like gifted sound player that plays with just the finesse and footwork. But the speed is something that I think is evident right here on some of this, on some of the footage here, especially in that first clip, and a big reason of why he is with the team.
And you're right to bring up the special teams element. That's his meal ticket, right? That's his free lunch. That's what's going to get him on this team. It is if/when he carves out a role for himself as one of or both of the returner responsibilities for this team. Not to mention the fact that I believe we have it documented that in the past, Brian Callahan coached teams have kept more like 7 or 8 receivers as opposed to 5, 6, 7 receivers. So if they're keeping more receivers, which there are a lot of them in this room, they've brought in a lot of guys, and based on the way that the offense is going to operate, that we think with Brian Callahan and the way he wants to run things, it's going to be receiver heavy. They're going to need receivers. I bet you they keep 7 or 8. We'll see in July what we think, but I think that he's a pretty sound option to be on the roster there. So this next guy is Calvin Ridley, and I want to spend some more time on him because he was the most interesting guy that I saw out there today. The biggest thing for him is he's explosive. You know, we joked when he came in and said in his introductory press conference, guys, I know I'm 29 on paper, but in real life, I'm 25. That's just the reality of it. That's what I am, whether you want to believe me or not. And today he looked like it out there. Now, again, it's one day. It's, it's a couple hours. He's running against air, running without pads, whatever. But the get up and go, the burst off the line is, and this is not news if you've watched anything from Calvin Ridley, like this has been his superpower for most of his career, is he can get on top of a corner really, really quickly. He can force you into conflict really quickly, and he can blaze by you if you're caught even a little bit flat-footed, despite having decent size. And so he looks to still have that. He seemed energized out there. I was impressed in particular with just the way, it's a lot of new names and faces out here, and yet he seemed to be taking on the leadership mantle of the receiver room, based on the way that he was interacting with these guys. Almost in between almost every single drill, he's talking to his fellow receivers or to the quarterbacks or both, talking out, motioning out, or physically walking out the steps or the fine details of the technique. He's the one doing that. It's not DeAndre Hopkins. It's not Treylon Burks. It's Calvin Ridley, who's been here for 10 seconds. And I think his eclectic personality lends itself to that a little bit. He's a people person. You can tell just by the way that he operates. And I think that he is obviously important as the Titans, projected wide receiver one outside guy. But even more than that, he may be a force multiplier in the sense of that wide receiver room truly having a vocal leader now.
Yeah, and I think that was pretty evident earlier today, as yourself and a lot of other reporters out there today were taking notice about how, Treylon Burks was paying close attention to what Calvin Ridley was doing, kind of asking him for tips on technique and some other, pointers to help him with his game. And Calvin Ridley was very willing to help him with that. And that's something that, like you said, they really haven't had a leader type role in this wide receiver room in a while. And I think that's something that Calvin Ridley, may have not been able to really do in his time in Jacksonville, just given the circumstances. But the new fresh start for him with all of that behind him may be a real reason of why he's been able to show this side so early.
Yeah. So we can move on, but I'm super stoked to watch him in camp. And I think that he's going to be a really interesting guy to keep an eye on throughout the summer. Here's Treylon Burks, a familiar sight for Titans fans. And, some of these clips, like I posted this and some people were with those first two clips saying he looks lazy, he looks slow. Those first two drills were, more jog through speed than run through speed. And then that last one where he gives up on the ball, it's because there was a bad pass. And I muted the video, but in the audio of the original clip, you can hear the coach who threw it say, "Sorry, Treylon, bad pass." So we're not laying out for passes on, May 21st. Let's relax on that front. In terms of the first impression from Treylon, who we're used to seeing, he looks trimmer. He looks, last year he got married, I think, right before the season, at the beginning of the season, somewhere in there, last summer, somewhere in the calendar year 2023. And it was talked about, I'm not calling the guy fat. I'm telling you, this is a relatable element here. When you get married, you put on a couple marriage weight, a couple marriage pounds. That's just anybody that's been married, a little honeymoon weight. That happens. You're happy. You're enjoying good food on your honeymoon. You're living together and everything is bliss. And you're just maybe not working out as much as you should. He got a little bigger last year, it seemed. And maybe that was by design. Maybe it's not actually honeymoon weight, but whether it was intentional or an accident, he seemed bigger last year than he does this year. And I don't mean that to say he has lost his physical presence. It just seems like he is toned up. And that's kind of reflected by what we heard from Brian Callahan the other day at the podium, where he says, Treylon led our team in distance run and in top speed during practice, whatever, the other week. He's very highly conditioned. He ran 3.5 miles today. He topped out at 22.5 miles per hour, whatever it was. That's the guy that I saw out there. So I'm not surprised by that. And we're going to talk about Treylon in the context of what DeAndre Hopkins had to say about him a little bit later in the episode. But I was talking to our buddy Danny Kelly, who's a national guy. He covers the league from a fantasy and draft perspective with the Ringer. I was texting with him after the practice because he was asking me about what we saw, and What I told him is what I'm going to tell you guys. I think that him being in that wide receiver 3-4 role is going to be what's best for him. I think that lighting a fire under his butt and making him fight for snaps it may not be good for him, but I'm at least intrigued to see how he responds. To not have the expectations in the summer be you're the one of the two, you're going to get opportunities, you just got to make the most of them. No, now it's not only do you have to make the most of your opportunities, you're not going to get as many unless you earn them. And so I'm just intrigued to see how he responds to that role, as well as the fact that, learning under these three savvy veterans ahead of him in Boyd and Hopkins and Ridley that's going to help any of those guys in that room. And I think that that's something that he's going to, if he can lean into those two things, that's going to be a big deal for him this offseason. And, whether it's a breakout in 2024 or not, you may see the best ball from Treylon Burks in 2024. That's the goal. And then this last guy, let's pull him up real quick. This guy, it's DeAndre Hopkins. First impression is it's same old D-Hop. He's out there doing the veteran minimum. I combine those words in terms of participation. So not as many clips of him running routes because it's May and because, you're in load management territory when you're in your 30s like he is. That being said, when he was going all out and when he was participating fully in the drills, he looked like the same old guy. Him and Levis are, I think, going to start the season as each other's favorite buddies, just in terms of, hey, they're the only two besides Treylon, but, in a different capacity. They're the only two starters on this team at quarterback, wide receiver that have any chemistry together. And so the idea of it, and Tyler Boyd talked about this at the podium today, this idea of when you develop a psychic connection with your quarterback or as a receiver, when does that come? How quickly can that come? And Tyler's response was, that takes some time with these receivers and so many new ones. The fact that you have multiple new guys that Levis is trying to get on the same wavelength as at the same time, him and Hopkins may need to lean on their 2023 experience together a little bit more heavily to begin the season.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's going to be one of the major things, especially when you look at all these receivers and how many times they were throwing the ball today. I think this was something that was pointed out, that some people said that they've never seen the ball thrown more than they did today in practice, which it is a practice. I would hope that they would be throwing footballs. The quarterbacks would be throwing footballs to the receivers so that they can catch them, because that's what we're practicing to do on the real field. However,
that's the idea.
It's you're gonna get maybe an increased, pass attempt number from Will Levis this season. Yeah. I'm guaranteeing you in those first couple of games, D-Hop is going to be the major target as they find their new rhythm in this new offense and scheme. And like you said, right there, the connection is something that's already established, that he has a leg up on all of these other receivers. So that's going to pay big dividends in the beginning of the season.
And to that point, not to go fully down this road, but the idea of, he's going to have more pass attempts per game. That's a given. That this offense is going to demand that. There is a world, and I saw some people ragging you the idea of like, well, he might be throwing 45 times a game, might be throwing 50 times a game. First of all, based on one practice, you can't say that. Second of all, there becomes a range of diminishing returns with pass attempts. Like if you've ever played fantasy and really tracked like pass attempts per game, you may have realized the correlation of, hey, a Dak Prescott, he threw 60 times today and he was amazing in fantasy. But that wasn't because it was a good day for the Cowboys. That was because they needed to score 45 points to win, or, they lost despite Dak throwing for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. There are very few quarterbacks in the league where I think any coach worth their salt would tell you, by design, we want this guy throwing 50 plus times per game. Like maybe with Patrick Mahomes, you want to do that. But even then, you watch September, October football. They're not doing that. They're trying to not do that as much as humanly possible. Josh Allen can be that way. Dak Prescott can be a volume guy like that. Matt Stafford can be a volume guy like that. Am I missing anybody? Joe Burrow can at times be Jared Goff can be a volume guy like that, but it's more a dink and dunk thing with Jared Goff. So with a Will Levis, I think wanting more is good, but you shouldn't want too much. And if I told you this year, Will Levis could average between 35 and 45 passes per game or 45 and 55 passes per game, you would probably pretty reliably be able to tell me, okay, well, if it's the latter, if he's throwing 45 to 55 times per game, probably not as good a season. Things probably didn't go as well as they would have if he had been throwing 35 to 45 times per game, right?
Probably, because then you also have to consider, we get it. It's the first day. It's the first real practice of May here that media was available for today. You're, like you said, you're going up against air with no pads, and we know how much Will Levis's hero ball style of throwing the ball last year got him into trouble, or should have got him into more trouble than he did.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the crux of my entire argument in this thing, is that how much, like, if you can tell me that he's going to fix those progression issues in that quick decision making that almost cost him a lot more than it really did this past season, then I'm all for it. But until I see, and we'll see more as they get into padded and we get closer to the regular season, until we see more of that, it's fine to think that he is going to throw 35 to 45, but for this offense to work, especially entering such a pivotal year for Will Levis, I still would be pretty shocked to see that.